Thank you very much, Gail. It's an honor to be here today and an honor to share the podium with Dawn. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me congratulate Open Communities for launching this exciting expansion of your work in the northern suburbs. It truly is an honor to be with you and to learn more about you and the work that you've done and the work that you will do. This afternoon, I'd like to talk with you about what I think civic engagement is and how Elmhurst College has made it a core part of its identity. I want to suggest at the outset that genuine civic engagement always includes transformation of the self, in addition to rendering services, and transformation of society, as well as improving the person. Higher education, as we pursue it at Elmhurst, tries systematically to offer our students experiences with both self-formation and civic engagement. I'll begin by saying a bit about two kinds of civic engagement, and then try and illustrate my analysis by examples from Elmhurst College. And along the way, I'll tell you a bit about my personal life and how it has influenced my views as they pertain to the topic at hand. Now, the notion of civic engagement may seem or be as simple or as complex as your understanding of society and your place in it. Importantly, if you consider society to offer a fairly level playing field for obtaining housing or education or wealth, civic engagement consists primarily of, on the one hand, responsibly and diligently applying yourself to exercise rights to acquire things to enrich your life, like houses and jobs and cars and education and so on. While on the other hand, it means, if you wish, but only if you wish, giving back to your community to help improve the lives of others. For those who believe in a level playing field as an ideal, the ethical focus is on the will of individuals to put their noses to the grindstone and just do it. And once social goals are achieved, you get the house or the job or the education. Our society's legal system rewards your efforts by recognizing a right in you to do with what you want with it, as long as you're not interfering with somebody else's rights. Familiar idea. Got that new car, drive it wherever you like, as long as it stays on the road and it doesn't go too fast, right? And you can afford to build a new house. Well, put up in a gated community if you want to. That's your right, right? When you do what you have a right to do, and I do what I have a right to do, we create a space apart from the community called the private sphere. Libertarians like Ayn Rand celebrate the private sphere as the due reward for those who work hard in the public sphere, by which they usually mean the economic sphere or marketplace. And on this notion, civic engagement, you think about it, is instrumental. We engage in society as we need to get what we want, and along the way, we may choose to help others if that pleases us, or if our religion or some other internalized authority compels our conscience to offer help. But from society's standpoint, this assistance is really optional. It's called charity, and it's directed at those outside our community. And when that happens, other people truly become the other, with a capital O. We may say they are less fortunate, though often we really mean they just didn't take responsibility and work hard enough, and their continued presence only shows that they see themselves as perpetual victims. Where have we heard this? How many of these other people are there out there? I think we all know one person has suggested the number is 47%. It's nice to count them. It's like the Beatles song, now we know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall. Nice to count them. And all of this, remember, comes from understanding the social field of opportunity as essentially level. Opportunities are equally available for all, and doesn't the legal system, neutral on its own terms, say as much? I think civic engagement gets far more complicated, however, if we believe society does not offer a level playing field, and the legal system itself, along with all other social institutions, are embroiled in self-interested behaviors aimed at perpetuating the status quo, including what becomes the myth of the level playing field itself and the sufficiency of hard work for achievement. One need not be a Marxist to reach this conclusion. It's enough to have experienced an unlevel playing field firsthand. Well, I grew up in a small Oklahoma town in the early 1960s that even to my very young eyes was de facto segregated. I had a very strong image of this, a memory of this in many different respects. Whites on one side of town, African Americans on the other, and only rarely the two did meet. Native Americans and Hispanics, interestingly, were utterly invisible, even though this is Oklahoma. The laws were the same for everyone, but somehow the houses, schools, and stores, and even the cemeteries of the white folks were always better looking than those of the black folks. And I don't claim to know how we were perceived by the African Americans of my town, though I can guess, but I know that most of our town perceived these neighbors as the other, living materially limited lives, so they imagined, because of their lack of a work ethic, their indolence, or, quote, just how they were, unquote. Now, at the same time, my own story was somewhat more complicated, because I was the adopted child of a Cherokee mother, coming from the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, a poor area of Oklahoma in the upper northeastern part of the state. And this Cherokee background is a fact that I remember knowing throughout my entire childhood. And as I got older, thanks to my adoptive mother's wonderful efforts, I learned much more about my Cherokee heritage, and it became an important component of my self-identity, and eventually of my professional life as someone who writes and speaks about federal Indian law and policy. I also learned about social inequality through the genetic happenstance that gave me light skin and blue eyes. My appearance allowed me to pass as white, because thanks to deeply ingrained racial stereotypes, Indians were and are still assumed to have brown eyes and dark skin. Imagine, quickly, what does an Indian look like? There you go. And this dark skin, red skin. I've never met anyone with red skin. Have you? Go figure. It's just an othering device. Not to mention straight black hair and, oh yes, a reservation environment. Taken together, these traits are all negatively valued by the majority culture, despite ubiquitous non-discrimination laws and the endless rhetoric of social equality. So my own civic engagement, therefore, required me then, and it does now, to frequently come out as Native American and tell my story. Something I gladly do to counter the influences of those stereotypes, and in some small way, I hope, to help recraft an American narrative of savagery that continues to hold in thrall small school children, anti-casino groups, makers of Jeeps, and fans of the Cincinnati Braves and Washington Redskins. Images of savagery all, or, toughness or something. I'm sure you too in your work around housing access have perceived how invidious stereotypes about race and poverty, gender, class, very important, and achievement work to keep people down and in their place and thoroughly objectified. It comes as no surprise to you, I'm sure, that our struggles in this society seem more often than not aspects of a single larger system of power and privilege, as indeed they are. In adulthood, then, it's become clear to me that civic engagement cannot assume a level playing field and expect to do more than mask or band-aid underlying biases based on race and class and a host of other-making modes of categorizing people. But, and this is the twist, sometimes you need a Band-Aid, and sometimes you need just a Band-Aid, or it's the best you can do. It's not an either-or choice. And at those times, the myth of the level playing field can come in handy to have its strategic importance to advance concrete opportunities through civic engagement with the legal and social ideals of equality. Provisional gains are gains nonetheless, and I think that's not a bad thing. We don't want to have the perfect be the enemy of the good. So these reflections lead me to suggest to you that civic engagement is a kind of paradox. To effect social change, we must participate in the social status quo while working to address underlying causes of inequality. For example, many of us vote, but we also consider how to eliminate the influence of big money on elections. Call this first our pre-critical civic engagement. We work through the systems in place. And call the second our critical civic engagement. We work to change the very systems themselves. Our choice is not one or the other. Both pre-critical and critical civic engagement may be strategically useful to creating or enlarging access to social goods and opportunities. In this work, I think it's paramount for us to keep in view the place of the actor in social action. Where you stand in a system is as important as what you stand for. Because that location, I think, largely delimits your experiences as well as the opportunities at your disposal, the money you have, the education you receive, the property you own, the citizenship status you have, even the food you eat. You know, is there a supermarket in your neighborhood, or do you live in a food desert? And for those of us who received what we have through a combination of hard work, privilege, and the grace of others, not to mention the occasional stroke of luck, the challenge, and I think for all of us, is to exploit our own privilege while undermining it. That's the paradox. And to maximize the possibilities that fortune will smile on our endeavors. Or as I like to remind my students each year at convocation, in the words of Louis Pasteur, luck favors the prepared mind. Right? So what does civic engagement mean for higher education? Let me offer the example of the institution that I know best, Elmhurst College. We've been a well-established, moderate-sized liberal arts college with a focus on pre-professional preparation and liberal arts. We're located in DuPage County, which I'm sure, as you know, is a relatively conservative Republican county. Lately, though, we've been ramping it up a bit. So, soon after my arrival in July of '08, we started a strategic planning process. And in the 4+ years since our plan was adopted, it's been vital for framing our commitments to institutional and individual engagements with society. In the plan itself, we named community as one of our 5 core values, and we expressly embrace cultural diversity as part of our mission. So, for example, we set ourselves a goal of having 25% of the entering class to be members of underrepresented groups by fall of 2014. And I'm happy to say that for the last 2 years, our numbers of underrepresented students as a percentage has been 33% and 34% respectively, thus doubling the number that we came in with 4 years ago. We also named social responsibility as a core value, and we say, in a nice pithy little phrase, we will perform our social obligations and call on others to do the same. One of the few nice terms of phrases in a strategic plan, if you've ever made one of those things. As a result, so we have a solid foundation from which to launch academic and co-curricular initiatives. It's hugely important to have legitimacy at this constitutional foundational level, I think, where everyone from a big tent approach is bought in to those core values, mission, and vision of an organization. That, I think, is the first step in getting traction. In this, we're fortunate that Elmhurst has a long tradition of both creating opportunities for public and volunteer service and reflecting on service's meaning for individual growth. We seem to attract thoughtful, service-minded young people, and our new strategic direction facilitates their self-formation as members of a larger civic community, and to do so in a critical way. One important way we address this larger civic community is through our urban studies program, started more than 40 years ago, and now directed by Dr. Connie Mixon. In her recent book, 21st Century Chicago, Dr. Mixon examines the intertwining of race and poverty. Racial segregation, all too common, of course, throughout Chicagoland, leaves citizens, mostly minorities, confined to ghettos with underperforming schools, lack of access to affordable housing, and few job opportunities. Examining the metro area as a whole, Dr. Mixon finds increasing poverty in the suburbs. Chicago is no longer a compact urban area surrounded by wealthy and white suburbs. Poverty is no longer confined to the inner city. Unfortunately, as most of us would agree, I think, suburban areas are too often ill-prepared to deal with the increasing needs of the growing poor. You may agree with Dr. Mixon's observation that one of the greatest challenges facing the Chicago metro region is the spatial mismatch between jobs and affordable housing. Increasingly, low and moderate income workers must move farther from their jobs to find affordable housing. Where the metro job supply is growing, there is little affordable housing. Someone control those balloons. Gotta handle those balloons. So let me repeat that one. Where the metro job supply is growing, there is little affordable housing. And where the metro job supply is decreasing, there is affordable housing. Dr. Mixon believes the solution to this spatial mismatch between jobs and affordable housing is either better public transportation for reverse commuting, new low-cost housing in the suburbs, or some combination of the two. So in our urban studies programs, Elmhurst students learn about exclusionary zoning laws, and they learn about how these zoning laws make it nearly impossible for affordable housing to be built in the suburbs. We look at how regional planning may be the best solution to address the need for affordable housing throughout the Chicagoland area. We seem obsessed with doing everything in our own town or village. And we explore the thesis in the urban studies program that without regional planning and agreement, there's really little incentive for well-to-do suburbs to become more inclusive. In 2009-10, during the depths of the Great Recession, we started the Poverty Project and identified poverty as a year-long theme for our cultural programming. And many in our local community were surprised to learn that, consistent with Dr. Mixon's work, 15% of DuPage County's population today is at or below the federal poverty line, due largely to increased immigration into the county, rather than flight from urban Chicago, as many of the residents in DuPage believe. Thanks to the Poverty Project, our students, I think, began to see their civic engagement not just as service to the poor, but as a movement toward alleviating, possibly, the root causes of poverty itself. Last year, we built on the work of the Poverty Project by focusing on democracy and civic engagement. We brought to campus a distinguished array of speakers from politics and activism, journalism, and academia. Our visitors included K.T. McFarland, Robert Putnam, Wendy Wolf, Naomi Wolf, Michael Eric Dyson, Dan Savage, Louis Manand, John Meacham, and Jeffrey Tubin. We also hosted Gary Chico, Jesse White, Senate President Mike Madigan, and Senator Mark Kirk. And we were honored when former Governor Jim Edgar was quoted in the press to say, quote, "Elmhurst College has emerged as a leader among Illinois colleges for its determined focus on civic engagement and service to the community," unquote. So I hope it's clear then that Elmhurst College today does not see itself as an ivory tower or a monastery set apart from the world, as so many preceding liberal arts colleges have done. Nor do we see ourselves as a fountain of knowledge, dispensing wisdom to the ignorant. Civic engagement, when taken as a formative value, informing all of your choices in an institution, means realizing every day, systematically, that higher education institutions are part of this world, and that an institution's choices of departments, courses, faculty, trustees, students, and yes, presidents, and even what counts as knowledge, very important point, are all inflected by the institution's underlying values. Hence the very great importance of a strategic plan process that raises up those values to discourse. If this is true, we have to ask ourselves then, how does the notoriously unlevel playing field of society impact these fundamental values and associated campus choices? Does it inevitably skew them in the direction of maintaining the status quo? Or are there opportunities within the master narrative the institution tells itself that can be used to bring about more radical social and personal reform? My money is on the latter. The decision we face at the deepest level, I believe, is not whether a university or any organization can get free of its biases or escape relations of power. By which biases, but rather which biases, which perspectives, which value commitments, which power relations will it choose to inform and vivify its operations. Similarly, rejecting the university as fount of knowledge or transmitter of truth means understanding that as much as we teach and convey information, we are taught. We receive information, and in the dialectic of learning, we are a partner in a conversation with a much, much larger world, whose boundaries, not a priori established, are always shifting and permeable, and whose interpreters come to us from any and all walks of life. There is a Cherokee philosophy for working collaboratively in this manner. It's called Gadugi, and it means all working together. As I often explain to those on campus, Gadugi is more than a catchphrase. For many Cherokees, it implies collective action for the tribe and its members based on a deep sense of responsibility for its welfare and future. Colleges are communities, and communities in the best sense are not mere aggregations of individuals in a social contract negotiated at arm's length, volunteering time in the mode of the pre-critical philanthropist. Under Gadugi, the community has a prior claim on the members' time and effort, and the goal of leadership then is to respect that claim and nurture it into the full flourishing of every member and their descendants. Under Gadugi, not everyone is similarly situated in life, but there is no one who is the other in the pre-critical sense of someone outside the pale of our concern, no 47%. Although we're willing to work with allies outside the tribe, we view it as part of our Gadugi obligations to develop our own concerns and resist the imposition of diagnoses from so-called experts on the outside, even the most well-meaning ones. I don't claim it's a unique philosophy, but it's proven a sound one for my personal life and for the life of the community called Elmhurst College that it's my privilege to lead. And this is a deeper, even spiritual notion of civic engagement. At its best, and I think I've seen it at its best, our students actualize that deeper sense on campus, but also through their educational interactions with members of the larger community. And let me offer you several specific examples, besides the Urban Studies program, of how our students are civically engaged and how their work conduces to their self-formation. Significantly, it is members of the larger community who identify the needs which lead to these projects, not Elmhurst going around telling people how to improve their lives. First, Partners for Peace is a hands-on social justice initiative from the college's Niebuhr Center for Faith in Action, named after Reinhold Niebuhr, one of our alumni from the class of 1910. The Niebuhr Center for Faith in Action brings together students, faculty, and others in the college community to create civic engagement through service work. The project has become so popular that members split up to tackle 2 community service projects in one day in struggling Chicago neighborhoods. This year's efforts mark the 4th year that Partners for Peace has helped neighborhoods in West Side Chicago that are struggling with violence, poverty, and neglect. And I can provide details in Q&A if you're interested. Several religious and social service groups are co-sponsors of the Partners for Peace projects, including on campus the Black Student Union, Hablamos, the Student Nurses Association, and the Patterson Center for the Health Professions, the Muslim Students Association, Spiritual Life Council, and the Office of the Chaplain, as well as groups off campus, including Corinthian Temple Church of God in Christ, the Compassionate Care Network, and Christian Valley Baptist Church, and the Islamic Foundation. We've also had long-standing community partnerships with CARE Plus, which is Citizens Active in Reading Education, and Exodus World Services. Both have presented the college awards for our collaboration. With CARE Plus, our students provide tutoring assistance for children in grades K-12 in the Bensonville School District. Through Exodus World Services, we provide support and basic services, including housing and language training for international refugees upon their arrival in the United States. These are people fleeing from troubled areas of the world or from refugee camps, which have served as their so-called home for many years. Many more examples of the civic engagement could be given, ranging from our faculty providing free music lessons and music instruments to kids in underserved school districts, to a 2012 campus-wide campaign this year to urge students to get educated about the election and register to vote, to students with our Spiritual Life Council traveling to downtown Chicago to serve from 300 and 400 meals, roughly each week, to people at an interfaith soup kitchen in the Printers Row area. Further abroad during spring break, we routinely send about 100 students on Habitat for Humanity trips. I personally see all of these endeavors as informed by the Gadugi philosophy of all working together. In thinking about the Open Communities, as it undertakes this exciting expression of its mission, I believe it's important to recognize that both pre-critical and critical modes of civic engagement are necessary for effecting real social and personal change. A principled pragmatism, I think, is needed, one that judges access and opportunity to housing and education and services by results, but starts by learning from others and empowering their work. I think it's very crucial that we do so. Speaking as one whose own history is filled with disastrous, well-intentioned efforts in the majority culture to help Native Americans by applying foreign ideologies and their assimilationist practices to devastating results, breaking up tribes and grabbing their lands, I suggest that we all remember the importance of empowering members of socially marginalized groups to define and state their own agendas and take for themselves a leading role in working them out. Once we recognize that the center and the margins, think about it, even in this metaphor, are aspects of a single community of interests, civic engagement can never again be seen as a stepping out of or down from an ivory tower in this society into the messy world of civic life, a gesture of noblesse oblige. Such a model seems to permeate one half of this election discourse this year. We are already, in fact, of course, in that messy world, and we always have been, and when we are honest with ourselves, our presence at or near the center, if that's where we find ourselves, morally commits us to a reappraisal of our own choices, to a constant critique of our own ways and habits of thinking and acting, in a word, our own self-formation. Like Elmhurst College and the modern university, Our only real choice then, and I would suggest that of the open communities, is not whether we wish to engage with society, but how we will organize ourselves justly and effectively to flourish as a community and as individuals. In short, how we will live out Gadugi. Thank you all for your attention, and I wish Open Communities all success in your good work on behalf of Chicagoland.